that one of the most important aspects of our Torah is the issue of good personality traits, right? Midot, as we say in Hebrew, right? Character traits. Chasiyat tebi, talking about, these kinds of things. So, what does that mean? That the Torah wants us to behave properly, to behave like human beings. Derech Eretz, Zdilova, there has to be, the person has to have proper manners.
Not like Chuck Schumer and the animals.
So, Rabotai, this concept in our Torah is considered to be one of the central issues of the Torah, one of the central themes of the Torah. Why is that? Because when a person doesn't have proper character traits, he doesn't have proper midot, so what happens is that everything that he does is tainted somewhat, somewhat filthy. What does that mean? That he could be, by the way, even a person who's Talmid Chacham, he's like a rabbi, scholar, Torah scholar, but if he doesn't behave properly, if he doesn't behave like a human being, what happens is that he degrades the Torah that he has. He makes the Torah into something filthy. You know what they say, right? That if a person is a Talmid Chacham, like a scholar, Torah scholar, rabbi, whatever, and he doesn't behave properly like a human being. So you know what they say, right? You know what that's compared to? It's compared to be like a person, like a pig, a swine. Right? Excuse the expression, right? Pig. But he has a golden ring in his nose. So what does that mean? That the golden ring could be 24 karat. But the problem is that since the behavior of this rabbi is like a chazir, like a pig, doesn't behave the proper way, so it's like these two contradicting things with each other. You have, on the one hand, 24 karat gold. On the other hand, you have the pig. So it's a disgrace, it's like a contradiction in terms. That's what it is. It doesn't go together. And this is the reason why a person has to be very careful, especially if he's a Talmid Chacham. He has to behave properly. Why? Because otherwise he desecrates the name of God. That's what he does. He desecrates God's name. Why? Because they say, well, look at this guy's a rabbi, and look at the way he behaves, like a jerk, Doesn't have the proper behavior, puts people down, insults people, doesn't care about respect, doesn't care about derech eretz, doesn't care about anything like that. So, Rabotai, derech eretz and character traits, zdilova, and character and good midot, these are one of the central themes of the Torah. But the question is like this, right? Even though the Torah very much stresses this, and by the way, there are books written on this subject, Many, many books in the Torah written on the subject of derech eretz, of zdilova, of good character traits, of midot. There's a lot of books written on this. But the question is it really something which is in the halakha itself, something from the Torah itself? Or is it something just good advice that the Torah gives you, gives you good advice? Try to be a good boy, behave properly. Don't be a bad boy. Have derech eretz, have proper manners. Is it just a suggestion or is it obligation? So what does that mean? That if a person, the practical difference is like this, right? That if a person is obligated according to the Torah to have good manners, so therefore if he has bad manners, he's considered to be a sinner. Like he's going over the Torah mamash, really going over the Torah. This is the question that we have to deal with. Why is that? Because if it's just a suggestion, just a good advice, so then okay, so it's not the end of the world if you don't have good manners, let's say, right? But if a person is really commanded to to have good manners, so then you got to really watch out, because otherwise you're considered to be a rasha. If a person doesn't have good manners, it's considered to be a sinner. That's a question, right? So the truth is that we find over here two major central opinions about this, two diverging opinions. One is according to the simple level of the Torah, the peshat, right, halakha, and the other one is according to the Kabbalah, according to the sod, according to the secrets of the Torah.
The Kabbalah was probably written by the Republicans.
Babylonians, probably. Right? The Babylonians. Is that what it was written?
I'm sorry, Rabbi.
Was it that way?
Okay. Good humor. Okay. So anyway, by the way, you should know that what is the since we got into this humor thing, whatever.
Jackie Mason.
The truth is, right, that there is a Gemara that says something interesting about that, about humor. So what does the Gemara say, right? That there was one rabbi in the Talmud, and probably also others, right? That Rava, they say that when he would start to say a lecture, before he started the lecture, he would say a joke. Yeah, you like that? Okay. So, question is, why should a person say a joke before he starts to lecture? Torah. Torah is a very serious thing. You know what I mean? So, what does humor have to do with that? What's the connection?
Joy to the audience.
So, that's the question, right? So the answers are that according to the simple idea, it's like, you break the ice with that. You break the ice with a joke, and people feel like more comfortable, so then they're ready to learn. It's like it's an icebreaker.
That makes sense.
It's a way to get people to feel a little comfortable, a little relaxed, right? Not to be nervous, whatever, not to be tense. No tension,
Right.
Whatever. Yeah. So, but the truth is, right, I saw according to, in the Zohar Kadosh, what I saw over there was something even more powerful, right? The Zohar Kadosh says something amazing. It says that if you want to learn Torah really good, if you want to be successful at learning, before you start learning Torah, talk some nonsense, say some nonsense before. Can you imagine something like that?
Get out of your
Shtuyot, yeah, a little bit shtuyot, yeah.
Like I'm always doing.
All the time, is the problem.
So why is that, by the way? What's the reason why it's good to say a little bit nonsense? Because according to the Kabbalah, this makes you learn better. Can you imagine? This is like something. It's something which improves your learning ability.
Does that mean that you have?
That means that me and Gocha were a gift to Chafetz Chaim, and the rabbi just didn't get it. We didn't appreciate it, and you didn't appreciate it.
Before you learn, involve yourself with an activity that is shtuyot, or just
say some shtuyot, say some nonsense.
Random.
Yeah, like a joke, something like that. Republicans, Democrats, these kinds of things. Why not? This is actually according to the Kabbalah, according to Zohar Kadosh, it's a very good thing to do because it's going to make you learn better. Why is that? Because it seems to be like it's a contrast, because Torah is so serious and so heavy. So to have that little contrast of saying something ridiculous gives you that ability now to get into something more serious, In other words, it's like an opening. It opens the way to get you into that. So that's, actually this can be a very positive thing. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Why do you think we have a funny president? God was thinking about everything when he anointed him as president. Yes.
He's the best.
He gave him looks, humor.
I love him.
But on the other hand, Rabbi, on the other hand, though,
Trump, I love him.
He's the best.
There's two different things over here, right? One is to say a joke, a little bit here and there, but there's also to make the whole lecture a joke. This is already not allowed to do such a thing, then, right? You know why? Because you're turning the Torah into a joke. That's already, you're exactly.
I guess that's what.
That's the whole.
That's why.
That's the.
You went overboard.
You know better than me. So what can I tell you? You know better than me.
At least they're happy.
I wasn't there, so I cannot tell you. But anyway, the point is, Rabbi, that there is a limit to that. But you see from here, by the way, that whatever is written in the Talmud, there's also allusions to this in the Kabbalah. In other words, they go together. The Talmud and the Kabbalah, the Zohar Kadosh, they go together. The Talmud just tells you he used to make a joke, but the Kabbalah tells you something deeper there, right? That this actually it improves the learning. To make a little joke like that, So it's an interesting idea. Anyway, getting back to what we said, here also we have a divergence between the Kabbalah and the Halakha regarding good character traits. What does that mean? That the Rambam, in his books, in his Sefer HaMitzvot, right? He has a book which is called the Sefer HaMitzvot. Over there, he counts all 613 mitzvot that the Jews are commanded to do. Each one is written out very clearly, right? Profoundly. So there should be no mistake, right? You should know. Okay, you told me there's 613 mitzvot, but what are they?
Right.
So the answer is, Rabbi, that the Rambam says over there that one of the mitzvot of the Torah is actually to behave in a proper way. To have good character traits, to have good midot. This is one of the mitzvot of the Torah. So what does that mean? Right, what the Chazal tell us. The Chazal tell us, the Mekubalim tell us, that each mitzvah of the Torah corresponds to one of the limbs of the body. You know that, right? Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yes. So what does that mean? That if a person doesn't keep one of the mitzvot, that limb that corresponds to that mitzvah gets sick. Becomes ill. You know, so from there starts all the problems, right? That's why he has to go to the doctor, to the hospital.
But we don't really know.
Why is that? Because he's not keeping the mitzvot. When you don't keep the mitzvah, that limb gets sick also.
But we don't know which.
Huh?
We don't know what.
This is the bones, not the eyes or the לא לשון, זה לא...
Everything, all the body, the whole body, from the feet to the rosh.
13 השמות, נכון?
There's the limbs and there's the sinews, right? Exactly, yes. So you have both those 6, 7, and 13. So let me tell you something a little bit scary by Rotai. That you know why they say now we understand a little bit better. Once we said this now, we understand a little bit better why it's considered to be so dangerous to break Shabbat or to do Avodah Zarah. Why is that? Because they say, right, when you do these sins of breaking Shabbat or Avodah Zarah, it's like you broke the whole Torah. That's what it says, right? It's like you don't believe any of the Torah. It's like everything is gone down the tubes. So you know what that means according to what we just said? That means that when a person breaks these mitzvot, Avodah Zarah or Shabbat, what happens is basically is that all his body gets sick. In other words, all his limbs now are not being supported by the forces of holiness. So he's losing the support in his whole body, and that's why he can get very sick. This is why a person has to go here to there. You know, shouldn't see from it, right? All these places, this hospital, that hospital, clinics over here, the Dead Sea over there, God knows what, right? Whatever, all these things he has to do. Why is that? Because he's not keeping the Torah. When you don't keep the Torah, the whole body gets sick from that, because of that. So what does that mean? According to what we said, if really having good character traits, midot, right, is one of the mitzvot of the Torah, like the Rambam says, and we should believe him, right? Why not? What reason do we have not to believe him? So therefore, if a person doesn't have good midot, doesn't have proper character traits, he's actually going to get sick in that limb, which corresponds to that mitzvah. So it's considered to be like he's a sinner, according to that. But corresponding to this, now we have also another opinion, right, which argues with this, seems to be arguing, by the way, with this opinion. Where do we find this? We find this in the Kabbalah. What Kabbalah are we talking about? There's a book called Sharei Kedusha, which is written by Rav Chaim Vital, right, exactly, right? And over there, by the way, who was Rav Chaim Vital? Just to explain to you, right, who this man was. He was a Talmid of the Arizal, right? The Arizal was the greatest Mekubal that we had in the last 500 years. Right, the greatest Kabbalist that we had. By the way, there was also one rabbi who said something which was a mistake. One of these rabbis who gives lectures over here, you know, the M guy, you know what I'm talking about, right? Mr. M. So Mr. M, Rabbi M, he said, right, something that was a mistake. He said that the Arizal was one of the greatest Kabbalists of all time, you know, right? That's what he said. Right, you know? He said, since Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, he was the greatest Kabbalist of all time. This is a mistake, by the way, what he said. Why do I tell you this? This is like ignorance, this kind of to say something like that. Why is that? Because the truth is, right, that the Mekubalim say that even with all the greatness of the Arizal, you know, that he was a great Mekubal, nobody was like him in the last 500 years, that's for sure. But with all that greatness, they say that his Kabbalah that he had doesn't come to a drop in the bucket of what the Tanaim had, the rabbis of the Talmud, the rabbis of the Mishnah. Not one drop in the bucket, yes. Understand? He was, in other words, compared to these rabbis, he's like zero. You know, I hate to excuse the expression, you know? Nothing. Can you imagine something like that? It's an amazing, so you see, by the way, how great the rabbis of the Talmud were. That their Kabbalah was so much greater than what we have today. We have nothing today compared to that. In other words, even if you would learn all the Kabbalah, you can get under your belt, you would go to all the Kabbalists over here and there. And by the way, most of them are fake anyway, you know. 99% are fake Kabbalists, these people.
Rabbi.
But even the ones, if you go to the ones who are real, okay, fine, but Kabbalah is Kabbalah and it's something else, you know. Kabbalah is secrets, you know. So anyway, the point is, Rabbi, that even if you go to all Kabbalists, you're still not going to have one drop in the bucket of what these rabbis had, those rabbis of Talmud. Who are we talking about? Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Akiva, like he said, right? All these rabbis. You know who these people were? How great they were? There's no similitude to what we have today and what they had in those times. You can't even, you know.
Rabbi Shimon was the strongest, right? He was the greatest.
Rabbi Shimon was the most, you know, how can we say? He was the one who spread the Kabbalah. He was the one who spread it to the masses, you know, the Kabbalistic teachings. In his times, by the way, in the times of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, the Kabbalah was being taught by children. You know, children were learning that stuff. 5-year-old kids were learning Kabbalah. Can you imagine? It was a very amazing generation. That generation, right? They say that generation was very righteous. Something very special, right? The Roman persecution. Yeah. So anyway, getting back to what we said right there. So Rabbi Chaim Vital was the disciple of the Arizal, right? So what does that mean? Rabbi Chaim Vital, by the way, he himself was also a great in Torah, but he didn't have such greatness in Kabbalah like the Arizal had. So he decided to become his disciple. Once he saw that he was much greater than what he knew, so he started to go with him, to be his disciple. So what happened was that because he became his disciple, he became his best disciple. Number one. There was also others, but he was number one out of all of them. So what happened was that he was zocheh. He had the merit to write down the Kabbalah of the Arizal. Most of the Kabbalah of the Arizal was written down by him, because the Arizal himself didn't write a lot. He didn't write a lot of stuff. He was too busy, in his heavenly spheres, right? He wasn't the man of the pen so much, whatever you want to say, right? So because of that, Rav Chaim Vital was the one who wrote down the Kabbalah of the Arizal. So he had a very big zchut, and all these books that we have today, right? Etz Chaim, all these books, Shara Gilgulim, Shara Kavanot, all these things. These books are written by the Rav Chaim Vital, who wrote them according to what was recited by the Arizal. Right? Who's the Arizal? Rabbi Yitzchak Luria Ashkenazi. Right? That was his name. Right? That was his name. Right? His father was Ashkenazi. Yeah. So his mother was Sephardi, by the way.
Syrian.
Yeah. So anyway, Rabotai, she spoke Ladino, like Spanish.
Right.
So anyway, Rabotai, getting back to what he said. So Rabbi Chaim Vital, he wrote this book called Shara Kedusha, amongst other books that he wrote as well. He wrote many books. So he writes over there that the issue of the good character traits, right? Midot, that's what we call it in Hebrew, right? Midot is like chasiyat tebi, that's what we call it, right? Those good character traits, he says, are not really one of the 613 mitzvot. It's not included in that. You know what I mean? He says it's not included. So what does that mean? He's telling you, not like the Rambam. The Rambam says it is included. Comes Rav Chaim Vital and says, no, it's not included. So what does that mean? That there are 613 mitzvot besides those that are in the 613 basic mitzvot, but regarding the midot tovot, regarding good character traits, good personality, so these things are not a part of the 613 mitzvot, but they are also something very important to the soul of the person. That's what he says, right? What does it mean this is very important? So this is the way he defines it like this. He defines it. He says that it's like you if you want to make a mashal, like a parable. What would be the parable? That we said, right? Like the 613 mitzvot is your body, the limbs of the body, right? Which is like the building of the body. In other words, you put up a building, right? So the building has 613 floors, right? Even Dubai doesn't have that. Whatever. Okay, they don't have that yet. So the point is, right? They have a lot. 613. That's the body itself. So he says, but the midot, the character traits, are considered to be the foundation of the building. You understand? So what does that mean? You know how it is, right? That if you build the building like that tall, without a foundation, it's going to fall, right? Because the foundation is what keeps it standing. Without that, it doesn't have a chance. You know what I mean? If you don't know anything about architecture, when you don't make a good foundation, the whole building is not worth nothing. Yeah. You see what he's saying? Interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay. Okay. Very good. So, yeah. Yes. Yes. Wow. You see what it says? He's saying that they have to dig more in the ground than there's above ground. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So anyway, Rabbi, what does that mean? That as we said, that when there's no foundation, there's also no building in the end. So what does that mean? That if a person, what Rav Chaim Vital is telling you? If a person has bad character traits, right? And even though he studies Torah and does the mitzvot, it's like you're building a building, and every time you build it, it's going to fall. Again. In other words, your Torah study and your mitzvot is not worth much at all. You know what I mean? Yeah. No, he's telling you something else. He's telling you that your mitzvot are not worth anything. You understand? In other words, when you so what does that mean? That according to this, By the way, I was told the same thing by Moraine Rabbeinu, Maran, Ravadia. Told the same thing. When he used to give us a lecture, the holidays, holidays now, he also used to give us lectures on the holidays. So he would tell us like this, right, that if you don't have good midot, if you don't have good character traits, he was talking to us, his students. He says, your Torah is not worth nothing, you're not going to get nothing done like that. And this is what he was referring to. This is exactly what we're talking about here. When a person is trying to learn Torah and trying to do mitzvot, but his character is no good, everything falls down. It's like a house of cards, domino effect, That's what it is. Amazing, right? That's what the Arizal is that's what the Chaim Vital is telling you. This is something unbelievable. So what does that mean? That even though good character traits is not really a part of the 613 mitzvot, according to the Rabbi Chaim Vital, but nevertheless, if you don't have that, you can't even learn Torah and do mitzvot properly. You're like a loser, basically, excuse the expression, a person who, doesn't, that's what it is. That's exactly the point. So, if that's the case, that's exactly why there were many big rabbis who took the time out to write a lot of books about this subject, about fixing your character traits, how to fix it. You got problems. How do you remedy this problem? You understand? There's a remedy for everything, right? So you have to know. And by the way, the whole thing is like this, right? That really, one of the great Balei Musar, right? The ones who wrote about this, Rav Yisrael Salanter. He writes, right? Rav Yisrael Salanter. He lived about 200 years ago, this guy. Very big rabbi. So he writes that, how hard it is to fix the character? How difficult it is? He says to fix one character trait is more difficult than learning the whole Talmud. Can you imagine to learn the Talmud? 60 books of Talmud you have, right? It's easier to learn the whole Talmud than to fix one trait of character. One character trait. This is unbelievable, right? So we see from there, right, that this avodah, this effort that must be done to fix your character is a very big job. It's a lifetime job. It's a lifetime work. Understand? That's the whole idea. Lifetime of work. So don't think that, now that I know that I have to be a good boy, so I'll do it right away. No, you think you're going to do it right away? You've got another thing coming if you think you're going to do it right away. Because it's going to take you quite a while, right? But the truth is, right, there are some people who have an advantage with this. Why advantage? Because they were born with good character traits. You understand? Some people just have a naturally good character. Humility, quiet person, not arrogant, not always bragging about himself, full of himself, as we say, right? The one thing you want to see is a person who's full of himself. Me, myself, and I. Me. All he talks about is himself, right? Me. Who cares about you? Do you have nothing else to talk about besides that? How great you are, how handsome you are, how rich you are. Who cares? Full of yourself, So we're going to explain, by the way, a little bit deeper all this, a little bit more profoundly, this whole idea. But there are people who are born with good character traits, very calm, very cool, very quiet. They're not aggrandizing, they're not, or they don't have these kind of, they don't have these problems of arrogance, haughtiness. They're born nice people, good person, You see people like that. It's probably pretty rare, by the way, right? It doesn't, usually most people are not like that. But in the community, if you go to any community, you're always going to find one or two guys like this, quiet types, very gentle, subtle people who don't, like his father was one of them. He's like, he was like, his father was like, like you couldn't find anything wrong with the guy. Always being gentle, always being. It's 1 out of 100 maybe a person like that. That it's not very common.
These are not learned behaviors?
Huh?
No.
You know what I mean?
These are not learned behaviors?
Some people are born with good character traits. By the way, you know why that is? Why is it that some people are born with bad character? What? It's not my fault. I was born that way.
Genetic factor.
Right? So some people are born with good character, some people are born not good character. And it could be by from the same family also, One brother comes out good, one brother comes out bad. That's the way it is, right? You know how it is, right? Each family has the black sheep, the white sheep, the black sheep. You know how it is, right? So, the question is, why does that happen? You know what the answer is? The answer is it's really according to his Gilgul, right? His former reincarnation, what he did over there. If he had good deeds over there in his former lifetime, So now they bring him with good character traits. That shows, by the way, that in his former lifetime he was a good boy. He didn't make problems. But if he has to come back, with a bad character, that means in his former lifetime he did some sins, and now he has to fix all these things, and therefore they gave him a disadvantage. He has to now work his way up out of the ditch. He's got to come out of there. Not so easy to come out, by the way, when you're born in a ditch. That's not so easy. Okay, so anyway, Ratai, getting back to what we said. Question is like this, right? Which character traits are we talking about? There are several. A person has to be careful about several things, right? But we have several character traits which are the main, problems, the main issues that a person has to work on, right? The first one, probably, that we have to deal with is gava, which is arrogance, haughtiness. Meaning what? That, there are some people, unfortunately, who think of themselves, like some kind of, all kinds of dreams about what they really are, and they're not really that good as they think, Not really so good, but he's full of himself, He's got these dreams about how rich he is, how wonderful he is, how handsome he is, By the way, there's regarding people like this, there's a verse in Tehillim, in the Psalms. You know what it says, right? Once, it's 4 words, but it describes the whole thing, right? This whole dilemma over here, right? This whole issue. You know what it says in the Tehillim? Ihalalu chazar velo picha. Just 4 words. Describes the whole thing. You know what that means? Ihalalu chazar. You know what that means? That the stranger should praise you, but not your mouth. Why are you praising yourself? For what? I guess you think in your heart that you're something so special. I have this, I'm that, and by the way, let's be honest. I mean, to be honest with you, look at the world that we live in today. Even we're talking about some good people, by the way. In the non-Jewish world, all they do is praise themselves. I accomplished this, I accomplished that, I made this money. Who cares? Why do you have to talk about that so much? I did this, I did that. I'm the best. They always say, I'm the best. You are the best? You sure? Who told you you're the best? If you think you're the best, that's already a sign that you're probably not the best. So that's what the Tehillim tells you, right? If you're really a good person, other people will praise you. Don't praise yourself. Why are you praising yourself for? What? For what? That means you're not really so good. Because really, it's what other people think of you. That's more important, not what you think of yourself. That's the whole thing, right? It's easy to love yourself. But what about other people? Do they love you too? Do they respect you too? That's the question, right? Listen to what they're saying. Don't listen to your own fantasies. That's the whole idea. But by the way, so we see from here, by the way, how important it is. But there's even something even stronger written. There's a verse written in the Bible which is even stronger than that. You know what it says, right? To'avat Hashem kol geva lev. You know what that means? This is unbelievable, this pasuk, this verse. Brings it down also in the book Mesilat Yesharim, right, of the Ramchal. The Ramchal brings it down also, this pasuk. He talks about this, by the way, the arrogance and this and that. So you know what that means? Look how HaKadosh Baruch Hu hates people who have gava, who have arrogance, who think of themselves, full of themselves, as we said, right? You know what it says about them? That the one who has arrogance in his heart, he's hated by God. God hates him. He's like an abomination. God looks at him as an abomination. Fool on you. That's what he says. That's what he says. In other words, can you imagine a person hates you, he spits on you? That's how God looks at a person like that. Fui! Why? Why is it so bad? We don't find, by the way, that God talks, that thinks about people this way when they don't put on tefillin, or they don't, the other mitzvot, they don't eat kosher. We don't find. But when it comes to arrogance, when it comes to haughtiness, fui on you. Get out of my face. I don't want to look at you. I can't even look at your face. I cannot be in your presence. That's what it says about people like that. Why? Why is it so hard? You know why? Because, right, the Gemara tells us, by the way, teaches us the reason why. That Hashem hates these people with arrogance in their heart. You know why? Because basically, the Gemara tells us like this, right? That a person who has arrogance in his heart, he's making himself into Avodah Zarah. He's making himself into an idol. What does that mean? He's telling everybody, look at me, huh? Bow down to me, like, I'm the greatest. No, I'm the greatest. So bow down right now, don't wait. Once you see me, for what to bow down? What makes you what? You're God? So what does that mean? That a person who has arrogance, has gava, that's what we call it in Hebrew, right? Gava. He has this arrogance. He's considered to be like he's making himself into a God. So God now looks at him and says, wait a second, I'm God. You're making yourself into you're competing with me? Get out of my face. I don't want to look at you. We don't have two gods in this world, right? The most important thing about Judaism is what? Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. There's only one God. That's all. If you don't believe in that, you're not a Jew. Yeah. You're not Jewish if you don't believe it. You're a Christian. That's what you are. Trinity. This is good. This is idolatry. Adonai Echad. Now you're competing with me. What you want? I'm on this side. You're on that side. You're making competition with me. So like you're making avodah zarah. Shem Yirachem. What? Why are you so full of yourself? For what? You think you're like like a god? That's why Hashem hates him.
Isma, my friend. Hello.
By the way, why is it? This is exactly the reason why we find that all the big leaders of the non-Jewish world that we find in the Bible, they all had this arrogance, inside their heart. Every one of them, with no exception almost. Yeah. Where do we find that? Nebuchadnezzar, right? Paro, Sancheriv, Haman HaRasha, all of them. What did they all do? They had one thing in common. You know what that is, right? They made themselves into a god. They came out, pronounced them, I'm God, I'm the God. Bow down to me. Worship me. Don't worship God, worship me. So a person who does that, you understand? I'm sorry, yeah. What are you saying? Paro, yeah. All of them, the Bible tells us, they made themselves into gods. Divine, proclaimed themselves divine.
The politicians are like
What's with you? What makes you divine? What? You're just flesh and blood. Like you're gonna be in a grave. In a few years, you're gonna be down on the earth. What makes you divine? For what? What are you divine?
They're like that because they're your leaders today. Nothing.
the worms are gonna get you.
By the way, what's the difference between their leaders and our leaders? You want to know? What the difference is? What did our forefathers say? Right? Avraham Avinu. What did he say about himself? Anochi, Afar ve'efer. This is what Avraham Avinu. This is exactly the difference between us and them. You have to know. It comes down to this point. What did Avraham Avinu say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu when he started to argue with him? What was he arguing about? Exactly, Afar ve'efer. That's what he said, right? Ani tolad. You see? What's the difference between our great people, our leaders, and their leaders? That our leaders proclaim, I'm nothing in front of you. I'm zero. You're the God and I'm zero. They come and claim, no, I'm the God. You're the God? What happened over here? How did you make yourself into a God?
So even our great leaders, our great rabbis, they didn't have that problem.
The humility was a trait, that they had. Yeah, humility.
If anything.
So now let me tell you, what was the story of the Avraham Avinu? Avraham Avinu, can you imagine? He was, on the one hand, he was a very humble person. On the other hand, he was willing to argue with God. He got into an argument with him. Yeah. So what did he argue about? Let's analyze this, right? Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Let's analyze. Yes. Very good. Okay. So let's see what. Let's analyze this, right? A little bit. So what happened was like this, right? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is now going to destroy Sodom and Amorah. He's going to destroy. Where was, by the way, Sodom and Amorah? It was in Eretz Israel. It was in Israel, Sodom and Amorah. That's where it was. On the eastern bank of Eretz Israel. So comes, yes. By the Dead Sea, by the Dead Sea, yes. So Kadosh Baruch Hu, says about Avraham Avinu, he says, you know what? I cannot destroy Sodom and Amorah without telling Avraham Avinu about this. You know why? Yeah, that's what he said. Yeah.
He was the high priest of the world.
Okay. So the question is, why did he say that? Why can't I? So he says, you know why? Because this land belongs to him. I gave Eretz Israel to Abraham and his descendants, right? So if it belongs to him, I can't do something to his land without asking him permission first. to take counsel with him, right? I mean, the truth is that this is like sort of like a... Yeah, okay. So now comes, right, Hashkadosh Baruch Hu and says to Abraham Avinu, excuse me, Abraham, you there? Yeah, okay. Let me ask you a question. You give me permission to destroy Sodom and Amorah? I'm asking you. What do you say about that, right? So Abraham Avinu starts to argue with Hashem, right? He says, hey, wait a second. What do you mean to destroy Sodom and Amorah? Maybe there are some righteous people there, and you can save the city because of their merit, right? That's the way it is, by the way. Usually, most of the people are wicked, and because of a few righteous people, their merit saves the whole world. It stands on their merit to rule the world. You know what I mean? So Abraham Avinu asks Hashem, let me ask you a question. If we find 50 people that are righteous over there, will you let them go? Let them off the hook? So Hashem says, okay, fine. So he tries to bring down to 40, right? What about 40? Okay, 40, good. Okay. What about 30? Okay, fine, 30. Can you imagine? Back and forth. Can you imagine somebody who argues with God like this, Going back and forth, This is amazing, right? So then he brings them down to 20. And then he says, okay, what about 10? Come on, let's go down to 10. You willing to go? Negotiations, Okay, will you give me 10? Let's go. 10? Do I have 10? Yeah, 10. Okay, you got 10. So in the end, like our friend said, even 10 wasn't there, right? So he tried to get him down, to bargain him down, a little bit. But in the end, it didn't work anyway. But the point is what? He had the arrogance. Can you imagine? The
balls.
Right, yeah. Yeah, he had the gall, right? Gall, yeah, okay. It rhymes. The two words rhyme with each other. Okay. So anyway, he had the gall to do this. But before he started to do this, you know what he said, right? Anochi afar ve'efer. I'm just dust of the earth, right? I'm ashes. I'm nothing to you, In other words, on the one hand, I'm arguing with you, but on the other hand, I'm nothing compared to you. I'm zero. Big fat zero. That's what I am.
Was he counseling God or arguing with God? Was he counseling God or arguing with God?
Well, it was kind of like an argument, basically, because you know what he said to him, right? He says, I can't believe you. You know what he told him like this? He tells God like this. Can you imagine? I can't believe, will you destroy the righteous with the wicked together? You'll do such a thing like that? He says, God forbid, He's telling God forbid, God forbid such a thing.
He was standing up for humanity.
Yeah, that's what he was doing. Yeah, that's what he was doing. That was his job. As the leader of humanity, that was his job to do that. But on the other hand, even though he's a leader, he's a great leader, and he was made the king of the world, whatever, all these things, yeah, that's true. But in the end, I'm just ashes and dust. That's what he thinks of himself. Understand? Just like our friend said also, same thing with David HaMelech, right? What is he, David HaMelech? I'm just like a worm, on the ground, like a little worm. What am I? I'm zero, I'm nothing. So you see, now, let me explain to you something interesting, right? That this issue of the character traits of humility and humility and arrogance, the opposites, right? Two opposites, right? Humble and arrogant. Two opposites. For us, by the way, for the Jewish people, this is a deal breaker. You understand? What does that mean? That if you don't have the character of humility, at least somewhat, maybe you're not perfect. Okay, nobody's perfect, but if you don't have it somewhat, so you know what happens with a person like that? He can't even learn Torah bichlal. He cannot learn Torah. He won't understand. He'll go to a lecture, he sits to listen to the rabbi, but doesn't understand what the rabbi is talking about. Doesn't go in, doesn't go in, doesn't penetrate. Thick-headed. Why thick-headed? Because he's full of himself. There isn't room enough to bring the Torah inside of him. You know why? Because his body is full of his own arrogance. There's no room. Can't go in. Person like that. You understand? So what does that mean? That for a Jew to really get involved with the Torah and mitzvot, the prerequisite is stop being so full of yourself, man. Have a little humility. You're hearing the words of God. Don't try to be a big shot now. Lower yourself. If you lower yourself, that's why the Chazal say, by the way, right? That the Torah is compared to water. It says in the pasuk, it says in the verse, whoever is thirsty, where is that? Yeshayahu, right? Yeshayahu says, Isaiah, right? It says Isaiah So it says, whoever is thirsty, let him come and get water, right? So what does that mean? We're talking about Torah. If you're thirsty for Torah, come and drink. So the Torah is compared to water. Why is that? Because when you pour water, right, it always goes down, right? It goes down, 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 as deep as it can go. That's the way, nature of water. So the Torah, the Talmud teaches us, just like the water goes down, if you really want to acquire Torah, bring yourself down, don't stop putting your nose in the air all the time, like, oh, where are you looking at that? In the sky? Where are you? You think you're in the sky somewhere? A person like that cannot acquire Torah. That's exactly what Rav Chaim Vital told you, right? That when you learn Torah, but there's no good midot, good character, it's like you're building a building and no foundation. Every time it falls. And that's why, by the way, you should know, if you go to yeshivot, right? They're learning, studying Torah over there. There's two types of yeshivot, by the way, in general, right? Two different types. There's the regular yeshivot, like Chafetz Chaim, places like this, where people who are from religious families generally, right, go there. Usually it's not like guys like who are, from the outside world, right? Usually that's the way it is, right? And that's why usually they don't fit in over there in a place like this, because they're two different species over there. You understand? This is one species. That species, right? The person who's from the outside, he needs a different kind of treatment. He needs a different kind of approach. He cannot take the approach of those people over there, unless he prepares himself for several years. If he prepares himself 5-10 years, so then maybe he can go into that approach. But until then, he needs to first prepare himself. So what's the other side? The other side is what the yeshivot, which are balei tshuva, the penitents, the one the teshuvah, they did teshuvah. There's also yeshivot that are built like that. So now, what do you see, by the way? You see something amazing, right? With these yeshivot, that the ones who are coming from religious families, they study and they go deep and they understand, much better. But these balei tshuva, the ones who are penitents, the ones who are balei tshuva, they have a hard time understanding everything. For them it takes like, they say, right, like it's like there are some people who go to these yeshivot, and it takes them like 1 year to learn like one parak, one chapter of something, Talmud or something, whatever. Took them 1 year, 2 years to learn one parak. For a normal student, this would take like a week or two, let's say, right? For a normal student, right. This guy takes some years. It's like his head is thick, it doesn't go in, like you have to hit him, with that dark, until something goes in there. Why is that, by the way? They're not stupid, these people, you should know, by the way. These people who are balei tshuva, they're usually very intelligent. Very high IQ. But the problem is that because of their arrogance, the character traits are not so good. So for them to get one thing inside their head takes like 2 hours. One little concept, one little idea took 3 hours to get inside your head. Why is that, by the way? You know why? Because when a person is full of himself, just think logically, by the way. What happens is like this, right? You think you're right about everything. You think you know everything. So when something foreign comes into your head, which you're not familiar with, you reject it. You tend to reject it, right? Why is that? Because you say, oh, it can't be like that. I know it's not like that. I heard something else. When I was in high school, they taught me differently. Obama, so he rejects it.
Obama was like that. He didn't show it like Trump. Trump is more comical, but you remember when he got in, a senator, I forgot his name, he was like 100 years older. He called him up, he said, congratulations, Mr. President, I want to give you some advice. And he hung up on you. He goes, you believe this redneck down from, Mississippi, whatever, is calling me to give me...
Hatch?
I don't know. No, not Hatch. He's dead or retired at that.
So the point is, Rabbi,
that's what he said.
A person, in order to acquire the Torah, and if you want to do it in a fast pace, by the way, because the Torah is very big, you understand? It takes hundreds of years to learn the Torah. Nobody can learn the Torah in one lifetime. The whole Torah. It's not possible. You need hundreds of years to learn that.
We all come to break it down.
Unless, by the way, you do some real rectification. You make a big tikkun on yourself, and then you're able to learn everything. That's very rare. Usually, it doesn't happen like that. You know why? Because you have to prepare yourself for that. You have to work on your character. What does that mean? Stop with your presumptions. Everything is presumption. I thought it was like this, so you cannot accept what it says in the Torah. Why? Because you always thought something else. So meanwhile, everything that tries to come into your head, you deflect it out. Deflect it out of your head. No, it can't be like that. No.
That's what the court is like. It's a presumption.
So This is the reason why a person who has arrogance cannot learn Torah. He doesn't succeed. He can sit there for hours and days and years and months, but doesn't go in, doesn't Arshadis,
He can probably learn the Quran.
The Korean.
I'm assuming. It's one book. It's
So-
easier. Very arrogant.
And it's very swingy. There you go with it.
By the way, the author was also very arrogant, that guy. Okay, so anyway, the point is, right?
I'm gonna kill people.
Like minds. Okay, so the point is, Rabbi, that from here we see how important it is, the issue of gava, to get rid of the arrogance. And by the way, the Torah tells us all kinds of things to avoid this problem. All kinds of innovations in your behavior that a person has to have. One of them, by the way, is what? To wear a kippah, to cover your head with something. What does that have to do with arrogance? What's exactly? Yeah, that's the whole thing, right? When you cover your head, right? That shows that what? That you believe something is above you also. In other words, you don't put your head like this, like stiff-necked, like this, Oh yeah, everything is me. I'm in the world. No, God is over you. Put your head down a little bit, Covering reminds you of that.
Is that why the Pope
exactly.
wears,
I was gonna say that.
The covering reminds you of that.
Yeah.
When you cover your head. So they say, by the way, that's why the Chazal say that a person who goes without a head covering, it's either two things, right? Two things cause it. One is he's a mamzer, he's an illegitimate child, or he's ben nida, right? He was born from a sinful relationship, right? Meaning what? That his mother didn't go to the mikveh.
But one can change.
You understand? Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But 99.9 Jews we don't wear.
I used to study and I used to never wear yarmulke.
So-
I only recently started covering my hair.
So you see from there, by the way, Ratai, that to cover your hair, to cover your head with something, in Judaism is considered to be a very, very positive thing, that helps you to humble yourself a little bit, get in perspective, Don't think that you're in the heavens. Yeah, you gotta, it's a nice trick to humble yourself. It's a nice way to by the way, many of the mitzvot of the Torah are for this purpose, to always remind you that something above you. Something is, you have to remember that. There's also other things that come in the Torah because of this reason, right? What's the other thing? By the way, one of the most difficult things in the Torah is to have total faith in Hashem. What does that mean? That even though things are very difficult and they're not working out the way you wanted, things are not not exactly peachy and rosy in life. They never are, by the way. You know how it is, right? Look at this poor guy, right? This judge. Look at what they're doing to him, right? Is that peachy and rosy? Not exactly, right? Not exactly peachy and rosy. Destroying his character, his reputation. Okay, a good man, good man. Terrible what they did to him. It's in the news. Check it out. Look on YouTube.
He's out or he's doing it? No. There was an explosive thing today. I was home watching it.
Terrible.
He'll be here.
So, Rabbi,
The man was crying in front of the Senate. They made him cry.
what can you do? So, Rabbi, a person demonstrates his humility also here. What does that mean? That no matter what happens to you in your life, you believe in Hashem. You believe in His ways, even though things are not going the way you wanted. If you show that nevertheless you're happy in your life, no matter what happens, you're always happy. That shows, right, that a person is also a trait of humility there. You understand? What's the humility? I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's flying. I don't understand this life. But I trust you. The way you did it, I know that that's the right way.
Rabbi,
that's the way,
with your wisdom, and I know you're a smart guy.
Thank you.
Do you believe that a 50? I think he graduated from high school in '82. He's our age. A learned man of his accomplishments, moral guy, who's lived an exemplary life, most of his life. Really did this when he was 17 years old or 16 years old?
This is a very good question, by the way. And I must tell you, this is a very deep question, a very deep question.
And it surfaced
very
after
deep question.
36 years.
Yeah, but the maximum
in the
is
last
not everything is
second.
so rosy.
No, I'm just saying.
Is that the maximum?
It may be possible.
By the way, and this is an educated woman. I mean, obviously from a left-wing liberal
She was put up to you.
So what's the answer, Rabbi? If you want to get an answer to this, by the way.
I'm asking for your personal answer.
Asking after the lecture.
Okay.
I'm dust of the earth. I don't have any personal answer. I'll tell you what the Torah tells you. I'm saying, what's personal? I personally have nothing. I have zero. I have nothing to give you. I'm sorry, but I don't have anything to give you. All I can tell you is what it says in the Torah.
We all have opinions. You're entitled to an opinion.
Your opinion should be what the Torah says. Now, what does the Torah tell you about regarding this? You know what the Torah says? En apotropos le'arayot. You know what that means? Nobody has any guarantee or guarantor that he's going to guard himself from illicit behavior. Nobody's guaranteed. Not me, not you, not him, nobody. Not Moshe Rabbeinu, not King David.
What do you mean guarantees in life?
What does that mean? That you shouldn't think that because you're so smart or you're so intelligent or because you're educated, you can guard yourself from that. It's not true.
But they're accusing him of doing this when he was 16 years old.
It doesn't make any difference. So the point is, Rabbi, that nobody can say, you know what, I'm safe. I'm okay, I'm guarded, Nobody's guarded. So what does that mean?
Being accused of something like
I'll explain to you. What that means is like this, right? That a person should never be comfortable with just, going around and doing things without guarding himself from that. You have to stay away. Keep yourself away from these things. Because once you get involved deep into these things, what does that mean now? If I would go, like, let's say, right, and go down the sukkah where the ladies are, right, and I would sit there, hang around there with the ladies, you're not guarding yourself like that. I'm sorry, this is not the proper behavior, You shouldn't be going and sitting with the ladies. How do you expect to guard yourself like that?
Well, here you are, because they're like 80 years old already. So.
Still, you never know.
By the way, there's no age limit either. You should know. There's no age limit. Anybody, even an old person can sin. Yeah, anything can happen. So the point is, Rabbi, the Chazal tell us that a person, there's also another very important thing the Chazal tell us. They say, right, that Gadol Adam, Gadol Yitzro. What does that mean? The person, if who's greater, wiser, smarter, his inclination, evil inclination is also greater. So what does that mean? Just the opposite, right? That a person like that who's intellectual, he can sin more than the person who's not intellectual.
Still doesn't answer my question.
I was trying to explain to you. So what does that mean? The fact that he's an intellectual and he's a judge, that doesn't exonerate him.
He's human.
It doesn't exonerate him. But you know what it is? With that situation, the thing is like this, they have no proof, in a sense. And when you have no proof, you're innocent. Unless they can prove that you did something, you're innocent. I'm sorry. That's the way it works, That's the way it works. So it doesn't really matter.
There was a presumption in this case, though.
Yeah.
They didn't give him the benefit of the doubt of he's innocent.
Because they want to, it's all political.
Okay, they're playing games, No, I understand you. But you should know, by the way, that if you think that because you're intellectual, that you'll be guarded from that, that's a very big mistake. It's a very big, There's no guarding. Just the opposite, right? That the person who's the most intellectual, he's the one who's able to do the worst sins in these things. 100%. Right? And that's why, by the way, when you go to the prostitutes, excuse the expression, right? The zonot, you go to them and you ask them, right? Who are your customers? They tell you, priests, professors, rabbis. Why these people? For what? Why? Because they're the ones who have the biggest tendency to sin.
Senator Geary from The Godfather.
You understand?
Yeah. Senator Geary.
Yeah. So you shouldn't think.
I couldn't have killed that girl. You see, we've done before.
Go, brother, go.
So, Rabbi, I want to also cover another thing, right? How much time do we have, by the way? What's okay, we don't have much time. So I'm going to just try to cover one more character trait, right? The humility, I think we pretty much understand what's the story. And by the way, when it comes to, I'm sorry, yes?
Go ahead.
When it comes to humility, by the way, says the Rambam, an amazing thing, right? That when it comes to most of your life, of situations of life, you should try to be in the middle. Don't be extreme person, fanatic, this way or that way. Try to be in the middle. Don't be too overly righteous. Don't be overly wicked, right? Be in the middle. What does that mean? Just do what the halakha tells you. Don't try to be Mr. Like above everybody. I'm more righteous than everybody, and show them that.
A little wicked.
Huh?
Sometimes.
So what does that mean? No, as long as you're within halakha, that's the idea. As long as you're within halakha, do what you want to do. Do what you have to do. But there are some people, who try to do like a little bit too much, and they try to show themselves. And by the way, this is because of gava, because of the arrogance that they have. You understand? In other words, the arrogance can also come from the religious element. What does that mean? I'm more religious than everybody else. You're also arrogant. You also have gava when you say these kinds of things. Why do you want to be so great, so religious? More than you, everybody does like this, and you want to do like there are some people in this neighborhood, unfortunately, even some rabbis, by the way, who have this problem. You know what they do, right? They put when they come to pray, shacharit in the morning, everybody puts one tefillin, they put two tefillin on the head, or they put two. So the truth is, right?
In our synagogue?
Yeah, not in our synagogue, but other places over here, right? There are some places over here.
Maybe that's their way.
And by the way, this is the way of the arrogant. This is the way of gava. That's what it is, right? What does that mean? That a person who does this comes in a place where they put one tefillin, he puts two. He's going over a sin. He's a sinner. This person. He's a sinner.
There's two types of tefillin.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, sure. You guys are so smart. Baruch Hashem. Okay, God, very good.
Rashi, right?
Let me explain to you.
Rabbi Shaul did that. But not in front of the
I'll explain to you, right? So yeah, exactly. That's exactly the point, right? That's exactly the point. So what's the point, Rabbi? There are two types of tefillin that we put, right? The Rabbeinu Tam and Rashi, two different types, right? But in a place where they don't do that, and you come and you do it, that's called arrogance. It's your sinner. Considered to be a sinner, a person like that. Exactly. You're just, yeah, look at me, wow, I'm Mr. Hotshot, I got two. And by the way, I tell you something. These rabbis who do this, most of them, you know what I say about them, right? I wish instead of having two tefillin, they had one tefillin and one brain in their head, because they have no brain. That's the problem. You understand? Two tefillin and no brain is no good.
Yeah, but
I have one tefillin and one brain. That's much better.
We're going to go overboard now. First of all, let us clarify two things: the difference between being arrogant and self-confident. It's a very philosophical question.
Right.
I do not want to argue or debate it now.
Right.
Okay. There are two different things.
Yes.
Self-confidence and arrogance.
Yes, self-confidence is very good. You should be confident. Yeah,
we're going to sit and discuss it and argue about it till cows up. That's number one. Yeah. Number two, even our Rabbi Aaron, which I respect highly, he puts on the first tefillin, then after Shemona Esther, he takes it off, puts on another one. What is that considered to?
So I'll explain to you, Rabbi, how it works. So the truth is, right, the poskim say it. It's written in the halacha. It's in Shulchan Aruch. That what? That a person who goes to a minyan, and over there they don't put two tefillin, over there is not allowed to put two tefillin. That's halacha. And if you do, by the way, I'm sorry, you're considered to be, he's liable to excommunication if people do this. It's halacha. I'm not talking to. And by the way, it applies to other things as well. In a place where they don't do that, don't do that. Like for instance, there's also another example, right? Famous example in Israel. This happens a lot. There are some people who wear on Shabbat, only like white clothing, like a white suit, white hat, white shoes, everything white. So why they do that? Because it's written in the Kabbalah like that.
If they move to Florida,
no, but I mean, people who do that, it's like they have their own synagogue. They do that.
So it says the poskim that a person who does this in a place where they don't wear all white is considered to be arrogant, excommunication. He's liable to excommunication. The person who does that, he's a big sinner.
Is it possible that he was brought up he was brought up? That's his minhag.
Right, but he has to know that when you go somewhere else, you got to follow the trend. You got to go with the flow.
You can open your own synagogue and do that.
That's something else, but the truth is, right, even if you have your own synagogue, if you're walking in the street and they don't do that, so you're a sinner.
Jimmy, it's like the guy with the Bentley. Nobody else showed up with a Bentley on Yom Kippur.
No, Pinchas wears all
by the hydrant. He had to. He did. By the hydrant. I'm sorry. By no steps.
Maybe he had white shoes.
So Rabbi, what I tell you is like this, right? That therefore, if a person does these kinds of things, it shows that he has a problem with arrogance.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. And he's doing it to show himself. He's not really doing it because he loves mitzvot and Torah. No, he wants to show himself like a big shot.
Could it be possible that these rabbis we're talking about, they don't know better?
Some of them don't know, by the way. It's true, but some of them do know, but they don't care. Regardless of what they know, they try to find some kind of they look for leniency. Why are you looking for leniency for this? Look for leniency to look normal.
But that would be the sin, right there.
That's exactly the sin, exactly.
Let's not deviate. My question is,
regarding this right now. Regarding this, I'm going to answer you.
Excuse me. Now, this guy, another guy, he puts both of those feelings together.
That's it, right? So
that's what he's just consuming time.
So let me tell you guys right away. I must tell you that since we got into this discussion, I have to tell you that Morin Rabbeinu, Maran Ovadia Shalom, he instructed us to try to put two tefillin also. Right. Rabbeinu Tam and Rashi. Every person who's God-fearing should try to have both of them. It's the order of the parshiot inside the same parshiot, but it's the order. The order. Yeah, the order is different. A seder, the shoneh. A seder is shoneh.
I barely put one.
They're expensive though.
Doesn't have to be.
May God help you to put one.
The small ones are expensive too.
In Rabbatai, what I can tell you is that even though Moren Rabbeinu Ravadi Al Shalom, he told us that we should have two. He talked to us, by the way, about for a long time about this. He convinced me, by the way, to do it. I was putting one, just like all the Georgians do, And then when I went there, he sat us down, and talked about this, gave us a third degree about that, He said, you got to do it. So once I heard all these things, I said, oh my God, such a big rabbi tells me this, I better go, So I went and I bought it. I bought Rabbeinu Tam.
It's a different scripture inside.
Same thing, just different order.
Oh, different order.
Different order, yeah.
Nice.
What about the two?
So, yeah, so that's the whole point, right? Two of them is when you put them together. That's what we just said, right? But let me explain to you guys. So he told us to put two, but in his synagogue, in the rabbi's synagogue, Al Shalom, also most of the synagogues, many of the synagogues, Sephardi synagogues in Israel, a lot of people do that. It's like a big custom over there in Israel. To put two.
Simultaneous?
Not simultaneously. In most places, they put one after the other. Right. Okay. So let me explain to you how it works, Rabbi. So you should know. By the way, I full wholeheartedly recommend to you that you should try to buy tefillin of Rabbeinu Tam. I'm sorry? Yeah, one after the other. But what we do is for Rabbeinu Tam, we don't make a blessing, right? We only bless for Rashi because the halacha is like Rashi, right? The custom in most places like Rashi. So therefore, since the halacha is like Rashi, so we bless on the Rashi, and then Rabbeinu Tam we put without a bracha because it's not really halacha. Yeah, al makom, yeah. So Rabbatai, sure, why not? Yeah, that's what we. So what did we do in the Rabbi Shul? Right. So what did we do in the Rabbi Shul? In the Rabbi Shul, what we did was like this, right? After we said the Amidah, the standing prayer, silent prayer, and we did the Chazrat Hashatz, and we said Tachanun, right? The Mividui and everything, confession. So we would stop over there at that moment. We would stop, and the Rabbi would leave the room. He would go to his private room, and he would put over there Rabbeinu Tam, and he would come out. Everybody was putting over there in the shul, Rabbeinu Tam, and he would come back out, and we would continue the prayers and finish like that. That's what we did, right? That's the way we did it over there in the Rabbi Shul. But that applies in a place where everybody does it like that.
I've never been to Shaul. Went to a brig one time. The Rabbi was there, and he usually puts two because he's the Mekabalim stuff.
Yeah.
And they asked him why are you not putting. He said out of respect for him.
Exactly, that was the point, right? So the point is like this, right, Rabbi? The Rabbi told us, Shalom Shalom, that even though in our place you do that, but in the minyan where they don't do that, you're not allowed to do that. So, but he taught us a trick also how to fix that problem. So what's the trick?
Get two and cover one.
So he said like this, right? Since other people don't do that over there in the shul, you gotta do it in an inconspicuous way. They won't notice it, right? So what he told us to do? Nice advice, nice piece of advice. I've done this, by the way, several times myself. What you do is like this, right? You take off the tefillin of Rashi, and you pretend, you put it in your bag. You pretend like you're going to the bathroom or something, whatever, excuse the expression. So then you come back in, you put on Rabbeinu Tam. They won't even notice that you switched. You understand? So this way, you're not showing people that you're Mr. Religious, Mr. Holy,
So you advise us to put on both?
Absolutely. I must advise you that, especially if you have the budget to do it, right? For you, $1,000 is not a big deal. No big deal. So you should buy it, absolutely. And it's a big zechut, it's a very big zechut. No, not with two. First put one, and then right. If you can't do it, by the way, in the shul that you daven in, because they don't do it there like that, so do it at home. Put the second one at home, or whatever. You can do it later on. Also, you have the whole day to do.
Is there an issue getting the one that has double boxes?
So now regarding the double, right? The problem is like this, right? In most places they don't do two together. So only, by the way, the Kabbalists do this. They put two together. The Kabbalistic minyanim. So therefore, a person should not do this in a place where they don't do it. If he does it, he's being a fool, being very foolish. He's not a rabbi. He's a jerk. When a person does this, he's showing himself that he's arrogant and he's full of himself, and he wants people to worship him. Bow down to him. Say, "Oh, you're such a holy rabbi." Oh wow. The truth is that just like our friend has said, Nisim, right? There's a story that's brought down about that. The rabbi told us this story, by the way, Al Bashalom. He himself told us this story because he was involved with it. What's the story, right? One of his best friends, Chametz Yonah Bashol,
genius,
who was a Rosh Yeshiva Prat Yosef. He used to put two. Yeah, he was Persian. Yeah, he was Persian. Yeah. He was born in Persia. Yeah.
He's a genius man.
So what happened was
very good friend with
he used to put two. So what happened was like this, right? Yeah, he used to put two together. In his minyan, that's the way they did. So he did that like that. But what happened was that one time they had some kind of a conference that they went to Panama, right? Both of them, Rav Ovadia Bashom and Chacham Ben Tzina Bashom. They were invited by Rabbi Zion Levi, who was the rabbi over there. So they went to Panama, right? This was like 50 years ago, this story. So what happens is like this, right? That they go now. Approximately. So they go over there, and all of a sudden, right? They see Chacham Ben Tzina over there. And he's putting only one tefillin, not two like he usually does. So they came to him, right? And they asked him, they said, Rabbi, don't you usually put two? Why are you putting down one? What's the story? So you know what he answered them? He says, Ma'adiatra po. He says, Ma'adiatra. You know what that means? He says, our teacher is over here, Rav Ovadia. He says, since he's here, he puts one. He said, I don't have the chutzpah to put two in front of him like that, Like show myself like a great rabbi in front of him.
And that
I don't have the chutzpah to do such a thing.
In that time, Rabbi Ovadia, he was put one.
Yeah, he was always putting one after the other, right? Understand? So therefore, Rabbatai, yes.
Let me ask you a question. So what about when the kids come to help you put the filling on? You're going to say, hey, I need two?
By the way, the custom is like this, right? That we only buy this tefillin after we get married. That's Rabbeinu Tam. When you're single, you shouldn't put it. Custom by the Sfardim. But the Sfardim is like that. By the Ashkenazim, by the way, there are some who put also. But why is that? Because we're afraid of Hirhurim. What does that mean? That a person who's single usually has like thoughts in his head, all kinds of thoughts. So since the tefillin of Rabbeinu Tam is very holy, so we're afraid, right, that a person who's going to have bad thoughts when he puts them on, and he's going to make the damage like that. So therefore, a person shouldn't put Rabbeinu Tam until he gets married. But there are some Ashkenazim, by the way, like Brestev, that they put even before. But our custom is like that. We wait until we get married.
What is in the box? Is that the Torah, or what is it?
There's 4 portions from the Torah over there, right? Four portions. So the difference is, right? Rashi, the order is like this. The Rabbeinu Tam, the order is a little bit different.
Right to left, left
right,
to
exactly, left. Right, exactly. So that's the way it is, Rabbatai. So a person should try to buy it, but also, you have to know when you buy it, do it in a way which is not conspicuous. So you shouldn't, be arrogant, have gava. Okay, God should bless you. Hashem to bless you all. Thanks for coming. Chag Sameach.
Thanks, Rabbi.
All the blessings to you and your families.
Thank you.
Chazak u'baruch.